Good morning, everyone. Hello, all, and welcome to this 2020 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Cindy Church, and I'll be your host for this session. Also assisting me today from the Georgia Public Library Service is Dorcas Davis. Today, we're honored to have Kaitlyn Hodges to share tricks on how to make your physical as well as your digital spaces more accessible. Kaitlyn Hodges is a Disability Services Librarian with Virginia Beach Public Library, where she serves as an advocate, and resource for patrons um, with disabilities, educates internal and external customers about the Talking Books program, and provides outreach services to the community. This event is supported through the funding of the Library Services and Technology Act through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Before we get started, I have a few things to share with you. This session will be recorded and archived. A link will be sent out next week with access to the archive session. There are other people watching this webinar with you. We'd love to hear about it so that we have an accurate head count for our records. Please send us an email with the names of the people watching with you to your state's contact person. You will have an opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters. Just type them into the chat box. You will receive CEUs for this session and other sessions included in the Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. Look for a survey link in your inbox later this week or early next week. And now I will turn things over to Kaitlyn. Hi, Kaitlyn. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hello, Cindy, and hello, everyone. Thank y'all for logging in and joining. My presentation is called, it's a little bit, I've changed the title since it was published, but it's Pushing Past Reasonable Accommodations, a Guide to Including Patrons with Disabilities. And so I'd like to start off by asking y'all a question. Y'all don't actually have to answer it. But what do you think of when you hear the words reasonable accommodation? Do you think of only doing what's necessary to prevent legal action? Do you think maybe that's doing the minimum just to get by? And should we as librarians want to provide what is reasonable and all that it entails and kind of the connotations to it, or should we want to do more? I'm going to give y'all some definitions and examples. I'll start out by saying you all, I'm sure, know what a physical disability is, but the word communication disability might not be as familiar. So that is a disability that complicates or hinders someone from being able to express themselves to those around them. That could be something like blindness, simply because we don't pick up on nonverbal cues. It could be deafness because we're not able to hear everything clearly. Speech disabilities, that could also include some deafness and mutism. And so basically, I just wanted to give that definition as well as that for auxiliary aids. That are aids that or materials and services that assist those with disabilities. That could be providing materials in a variety of formats, having staff or helpers available to read things for patrons, take notes, or interpret. Having devices with real-time captioning or speech-to-speech transitioners. So in order to make accommodations for those with communication disabilities, it's good practice to utilize these auxiliary aids in order to improve the patron experience. So you may wonder how to accommodate communication disabilities like we discussed. You can provide auxiliary aids, consider alternate ways of expression that may be less complex. and provide a welcoming, non-judgmental environment. That could be your physical space as well as your digital. In short, everyone should be able to access your library and its resources. And going forward through this presentation, you may want to consider the accessibility of your public computers when questioning how to accommodate those with communication disabilities. And there will be tips to follow. And on a side note, I've just noticed from experience as technology advances, patrons tend to expect more, so we should be ready and willing to make those accommodations when necessary. So, so the first thing I'm really going to dive into is operating system accessibility. Most operating systems have built-in accessibility features, such as Windows accessibility. To get there, you'd select the ease of access, and for that, you can click on narrator, audio description, magnifier, cursor and pointer size, or high contrast themes. Y'all probably already know, but most of these are for people who have vision impairments or low vision. And they're free alternatives to screen reading or magnification software. However, if you have many patrons that come in your library that need magnification software, a better option might be to purchase programs such as ZoomText or Fusion or JAWS. But if you only have a few or once every long period of time come in, the operating system accessibility features are an alternative. But you also ought to think maybe on the flip side, having an accessible workstation with things like programs like ZoomText or JAWS could actually be a draw for people to come in your library. So. There are also Mac accessibility settings. For that, you'd select the system preferences and then accessibility, and the features include voice control, voiceover, text-to-speech, zoom and hover text, cursor and pointer size, and dark mode and high contrast themes. Just a rule of thumbs, and anyone who is blind or low vision probably knows this, Apple products tend to be more accessible than Windows products. However, they're usually cost prohibitive. That's why most people with low vision have iPhones, if you notice. But because it just offers more features and options than Windows accessibility, as you can tell, the list is much longer. So for web accessibility, if you're creating a website or if you're wanting to test your current website, you'll follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I have the link to download it, and whenever you're creating a website and adding things like pictures or images, you'll also want to use the alt text feature. Even if other aspects of web accessibility are completely out of your control. So you'll want to follow those standards. And if you do not have control over your website, consider asking your library's webmaster if they have run these accessibility checkers, and ask what the result has been. An example is with the Virginia Beach Public Library. It's only 83% accessible because certain aspects of the website are completely out of the library's control and are controlled by the city. Because they like controlling the look and feel. The problems that they have noticed occur with website banners, broken or expired links, color contrast. I think the banners are quite possibly the worst from what I was told. However, our webmaster does regularly run checkers in hopes that, it'll be more accessible and just to make sure he keeps up with it. But the results typically the same. Things that you can probably control if you have access to modifying your website would be things like you should be able to edit the font size, and to make it easier to read for low vision patrons. Sometimes you can change the color and the font style. For that, you'll want to use sans serif fonts, so less loopy. It's just easier to read. Let's see. What as I was talking about alt text on the last slide, I thought I should give y'all the definition and how to create it. It's text a computer or screen reader reads in place of an element. It cannot recognize like a picture. It's crucial for accessibility purposes. And there are a couple things it needs to be. It needs to be concise and to avoid being verbose. Mindful of the context of the badge, be descriptive and convey the meaning of the image, and it needs to end with a period. It does not need a title or to say the word picture or image. I've run checkers with this, and there's nothing more annoying than it just saying image, 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 and you not knowing what the image actually is. And it's useful for those with screen readers, such as JAWS, so that the images are described more adequately, and instead of being skipped over or read as, like I said, image or picture. Next is browser accessibility. The first one I'm going to tell y'all about is the built-in accessibility features in Firefox. This is page zoom, keyboard shortcuts, text zoom, overriding page fonts, and overriding colors. So this is separate from the operating system accessibility, and they have their own settings. As you will see in the next slide, accessing Firefox's accessibility settings is easier than that of Google Chrome. Like, it's more built-in and intuitive. Google Chrome, you have to go through a couple extra steps, and I will detail that in the next slide. Okay, for Google Chrome, you have to find and add the accessibility extensions. So that's definitely some extra steps here. You'll go to Chrome's web store and search for accessibility. Then you'll need to click on the extension, and then at the top right, click on Add to Chrome, and then Add Extension. And then you should see an icon for the extension at the right of the address bar. It's just several extra steps with that one, as opposed to Firefox. And then a little bit more on Google Chrome. Once you've actually added those accessibility widgets, you can utilize things like caret browsing, which is browsing only using your keyboard, color enhancers, high contrast, or image alt text viewer. So it's good that both are offered, but some are just a little bit easier to utilize than others. All right, we're going to get in a little bit on physical accessibility, and we're going to stay on this slide a little bit longer than we have the others. What you're going to want to look for when you're doing an accessibility audit on your physical space, there are a lot of things that you're going to need to check. For parking, you're going to need one handicap space for every 20 spots. Then the handicap spaces must also be 8 feet wide by 8 feet, with an 8 feet aisle, and be on a hard level surface. There must be adequate signage for the handicap spots, and if there's a curb, the curb cut must be near the building entrance and close to the actual handicap parking. For the signage, they should be large, readable, and not too high for those in wheelchairs. And signs with Braille on them must be placed where blind individuals can read and touch them. As crazy as it sounds, do not frame your Braille. That has happened before, and it makes the Braille pointless. Path and doors. The path should be smooth with a hard surface and no obstacles. It should be at least 36 inches wide and have a ramp if necessary, and the door opening should also be 36 inches wide and should be easily opened. And the thresholds cannot be more than 1/4 inch high, and you need to label inaccessible entrances and provide directions to accessible entrances. Elevators and stairs. If the building is more than one level, there needs to be an accessible elevator. And the stairs should be at least 36 inches wide and have handrails. Steps should also be non-slip and no more than 11 inches high. That's for people with mobility challenges, as you can tell. Most of these are. The floors, they should be flat, smooth, and without debris or obstacles, and not in loud colors. Loud colors can be very distracting for people with vision impairments. And the lighting should be strong, uniform, and glare-free, and the walls should also not be in a dark color. The public access catalogs and computer stations, they should have 36 inches of clear space around them. They should be accessible for those who sit in front of them. And the furniture should have 40 inches of clear space around them. The tables should be 27 inches high clearance and 19 inches of depth underneath. That can be really tricky when you're doing an audit, and I'll tell y'all a little bit more about my experience with doing an audit at my library. The periodicals and stacks, the top row of periodical sections should not be more than 48 inches high, and they should have a sign indicating that you should ask for assistance if you cannot reach the items. And they should have 36 to 42 inch wide aisles in the stacks. And checkout counters need to be 36 inches high and at least 36 inches long. If you aren't noticing a pattern here, you should be. 36 inch clearance is pretty much the standard on a lot of these. Reference and help desk. The desk shouldn't be too high for a person in a wheelchair, but it can have a lower section in it to make it possible for people in a wheelchair to utilize it. And restrooms, they should never be blocked, and the stalls should be 5 feet by 5 feet. At least the handicap stall should be, and have grab bars. Pictures should not be higher than 48 inches, and sinks should be the push handle or the motion activated ones. When I conducted an accessibility audit here, the main issue of inaccessibility was furniture, desks, seating, and furniture that kind of just slightly dug into the 36-inch clearance. There also was a noticeable, it went into the depth of underneath the computer's magazine racks did, and then the lower keyboards could also cause a problem when you're doing that. So that's just some things to kind of look out for when you're conducting a physical accessibility audit. Okay, so what you can do to prepare. You can understand the principles of universal design, such as small modifications can benefit everyone, not just those with disabilities. A good example for that is curb cuts, but I'm sure y'all probably got a little bit more information on that on the session that was actually all about universal design. I think it was yesterday in the Web Collaborative. You can use an accessibility checklist of your physical space. A good one, and the one that I liked the most when conducting this research, was provided by Project Enable. It's actually a checklist, and it has notes fields, and it's something that you can just print out and go. So I definitely suggest that one. There's a lot of others out there, but that was the one that I liked the best. For the, you can run accessibility checkers on your websites, resources, and catalogs. Just for that, just refer to the earlier slide. And consider accessibility when making purchasing decisions at your library. An example for that would be the Virginia Beach Public Library requires all purchases for public use be accessible, specifically with the self-checkout stations, like with Beanstack. Accessibility was a big consideration when they were purchased, and it stuck around as a consideration when new items are purchased. You'll also want to practice using the built-in accessibility features on your computers, such as the browser as well as the operating system accessibility features. And just on a side note, I'm also meant to mention that you might also want to look at the ASCLA tip sheets available if you're wanting to make your programs more accessible or communication a little bit easier with people who have disabilities. They've got it divided by the disability, and they're very, very informative. And last but not least, you'll want to include an accessibility statement on all promotional materials. For that, I've actually had some personal experience with this issue, so I can give y'all a little bit of background. It's needed for, in my opinion, internal or external programming, both of those, because as someone who needs accommodations, I have a vision impairment, and when I want to attend a training, there hasn't been an accessibility statement in the past. Now it seems like we're working on that, you know, with increased communication and some discussions that have been had. But for the past couple that I've attended, there wasn't an accessibility statement, and there wasn't anyone specifically designated to receive accommodation requests. So what that does, if there isn't an accessibility statement and someone who can take those requests, the person needing accommodations will know who to contact instead of having to search them out, essentially, and then always having a hurdle to jump through and hoops necessary to get what you need to equally participate. So it just takes a lot of the guesswork. It makes it less time consuming for those who need accommodations. And it makes sure that the person who's accepting those accessibility requests, those accommodation requests, kind of already knows a little bit. When there's no one designated to take those requests, they're usually caught completely off guard when you make a request. So just having these internal processes in place can make things a lot easier for staff or patrons wanting to attend a training or a program. It just makes life easier for everyone. But a little bit more about my experience is after having to find out the appropriate person to contact when doing a training. I've had issues occasionally where trainers will just ignore the request. They might put it off a little bit or only partially fulfill it. One trainer, he only provided part of the materials in large print and then did not ensure the people who needed large print got it. Another was on diversity and inclusion, actually, and I didn't get the materials until the morning of, and I was actually sitting in my seat at the training. So for that, I wasn't able to print them out large or anything like that. However, I am hopeful that it will get better with communication. But if the accommodation statement was already out there and if the process was already in place, it would have made it easier for everyone. And if let's see. And it also allows everyone to equally participate in the program or training you are doing without having unnecessary barriers. Even if there aren't anything, it isn't anything like a handout, a video, a slide, etc., it's still good practice. But if there are handouts, slides, things like that, it's good to already have that in place because it'll kind of cover you. All right, so let's see. The next thing I'm going to discuss is when you're interacting with patrons with disabilities, what you do and you don't do. And a lot of these are probably pretty intuitive, but I still feel like I need to discuss. What you should do is ensure that the patron is comfortable and ask if they need assistance, but also respect their answer. If they want to do it on their own, let them. If they want to get somewhere by themselves, let them. You also want to provide materials in a variety of formats and plan programs that cater to a variety of learning needs and styles. I'm sure y'all have also heard of this. Use person-first language. Instead of saying things like the deaf person or the blind person, identify them as a person first, not by their disability. And be accepting of people who want to make their own accommodations. And refer those who qualify to their NLS regional or sub-regional library. We'll go a little bit more into detail with that in the second portion of the presentation. And what you don't want to do. You don't want to provide assistance without asking first. And to go along with that, you don't want to provide assistance if they tell you that they don't need it. You also don't want to make assumptions about their disability or what they can and can't do or know. If instead of making assumptions, strike up a conversation a little. That way you don't have like a giant blunder. Talk to or distract a service animal if they're working. Don't do that. It should go without saying, but a lot of people think, oh, cute dog, I want a pet. Don't do that if the dog's working. Don't amplify your voice when you're interacting with patrons who are blind or low vision. Should go without saying, but happens a lot. Also, don't be ignorant. I know that sounds pretty simple, but when I say that, what I'm talking about is just use your best judgment. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. Don't say or do something that you wouldn't like said or done to you. Sometimes it really is that simple. If you know someone personally who will need accommodations to equally participate in something you are doing, ask them and take the initiative to meet their needs. And also, from personal experience, don't host a training on inclusion and exclude a portion of your audience. That's happened twice. The worst one I can tell you is at a previous job while I was participating in a mandatory training on EDI, the trainer who I'd been acquainted with for years called me and a coworker out for my coworker reading handouts, which was in very small print to me in front of the entire group. For that, we were simply trying to make my own accommodations since it wasn't met, and I was unaware of at the time that there were even going to be handouts during the training. I would have requested accommodations had I known that, but in a lot of cases, you don't know what you don't know. But for that, that was a giant misstep, because going back to you provide materials in a variety of formats, and then be accepting of people who want to make their own accommodations. All right. The next portion of this, I'm going to discuss utilizing the National Library Services Talking Books program. So that is, I work for the Virginia Beach Public Library, which is a regional, a sub-regional for the National Library Service for the Blind. Our regional is actually in Richmond, but I'll get into that a little bit more later in the presentation. I'm just going to give you a short history lesson. On March 3rd, 1931, the Pratt Smoot established Library Service for the Blind, and then the next day a joint resolution was passed to establish the National Library Service for the Blind. Then in 1933, Standard English Braille and the Talking Book were invented, and in 1952, service was open to blind children. Prior to that, it was only adults. In 1966, it was expanded to people with physical disabilities. Since then, it has also included learning disabilities. And over the years, the formats have changed, but NLS has continued to serve people that qualify for a very long time. And in my opinion, most of the libraries are doing a very good job of this. If you're wanting to know what your regional or sub-regional is, for Georgia, that is the Georgia Library for Accessible Statewide Services, which is GLASS. And they have a sub-regional, the Southwest Library for Accessible Services. In South Carolina, that's the South Carolina State Library's Talking Book Services. In North Carolina, it's the North Carolina Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. And in Virginia, it's the Virginia Library and Resource Center. That's out of the Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired. And Virginia actually has a lot of sub-regionals compared to the other states. They have a sub-regional at the Alexandria Library, the Arlington Public Library, Fairfax County Library, the Bayside and Special Services Library, which is the one I work at in Virginia Beach, the Roanoke Public Library, the Talking Book Center in Staunton, and the Fredericksburg area sub-regional. So it's the Central Rappahannock. It's within that public library system. Let's see. So what is supplied to customers of the Talking Books? Reading material, personal assistance with book selection. All of them have a staff of reader advisors ready and willing to assist people if they're not sure exactly what they want to read. Most of them have technology training, help with, their assistive technology, or help with utilizing their phone, like iPhone, Android, things like that. Programming opportunities, and much, much more depending on the library. The materials provided by most Talking Book services, that's the digital book and the digital player, large print books, Braille or twin vision books. I know Georgia and South Carolina actually subcontract with Utah for their Braille, but North Carolina and Virginia have a standing Braille collection. But not all Virginia subregionals have Braille. We only have Twin Vision books. We also offer book downloads via Bard and descriptive DVDs. Descriptive DVDs are DVDs that you would just normally buy but have the added descriptive audio feature. That's usually in the menu settings where you would go to change like a language. You could add descriptive audio. Service eligibility, it's available to people who are blind or low vision. That could be people with cataracts, glaucoma, retinitis pigmentosa, macular degeneration, or diabetic retinopathy. It could be people who have a physical disability, such as those who have experienced a stroke, Parkinson's, broken or amputated limbs, or muscular sclerosis, or those who have a reading disability. Right now, that is just encompasses those with dyslexia. However, NLS is investigating the possibility of it being expanded to people with other conditions, but they're just not there yet. So also institutions are eligible for accounts through NLS regionals or sub-regionals, and they are any institution who serves qualifying patrons such as nursing homes, assisted livings, rehab centers, schools with special ed classrooms, or library branches or school libraries. At these places, they could manage people's individual accounts, or they could have their own account for things and just provide individuals with the equipment and really manage it. But those are also things to think about. And public libraries, they, at least around here, we supply each Virginia Beach Public Library branch with their own talking book player and book for demo purposes. So they actually have institution accounts. So how it works, you'll need possible patrons, or if you're wanting to sign somebody up, they'll need to fill out an application, individual or institutional, with the signature of a certifying authority, send the application, or come into the regional or sub-regional to fill it out, get books and services, and then you'll get books and services from the library. They'll be received through the mail, through the U.S. Postal Service, or downloaded to a smart device. So when filling out the application, there are several parts, but each regional or sub-regional usually wants all of this. Each one may look different, but the information is usually the same. The name and contact information, alternate contact, veteran status, material format preference, reading preferences, certifying authority's signature, and eligible medical condition. So let's see. Certifying authorities include doctors, optometrists, ophthalmologists, rehab counselors, activity coordinators, nurses or other medical professionals like occupational therapists, physical therapists, teachers of the vision impaired, and librarians and or library staff depending on your regional or sub-regional. The only exception is that reading disabilities must be certified by a doctor. And again, that is another thing that NLS is investigating, expanding and allowing a little bit more leniency on who could certify reading disabilities, but they're not there yet. So how patrons access materials, they'll just call or email their regional or sub-regional telling them authors, subjects, book titles, anything like that to order books. They can search or add books using the library's online catalog. They can visit their library to discuss reading preferences or pick up books, or they could download books from Bard. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about Bard in a couple slides. How materials will get mailed back. All you'll need to do is flip the label over on the outside of the container to show are to show the address of the regional or sub-regional, and you'll see the words free matter for the blind where the stamp would normally go. All you'll need to do after that is once it's been flipped over and doesn't show your address, shows the address that it's going to, you'll place the book in the mailbox for your postman to take. Postage is paid in full through the National Library Service for the Blind, so everything goes back and forth free matter for the blind. So, like promised, I was going to talk a little bit about BARD. It stands for Braille and Audio Reading Download, and it's available as an app for a computer or a mobile device and allows patrons to instantly download audiobooks or web braille to their device. For the web braille, they'd need to also have a refreshable braille display. The benefits to BARD are you do not have to wait on the U.S. Postal Service for books. There's more selection than the physical collection. You can keep books for as long as your device has space, and it is more portable than the player. It works on Apple products such as the iPhone, iPad, anything like that. It can work on Android devices, Samsung, Google, LG, any of that, or a Kindle Fire. The old Kindle like Paperwhite, that wouldn't work with BARD, but as long as it's a tablet, it should work. So that's just some food for thought. BARD is really, really good for our younger and more tech-savvy patrons. If they're young or tech-savvy, that BARD is probably their preference. So if you interact with somebody that you think is under that, definitely mention BARD to them when you're filling out the application or certifying them. This is just a look at the BARD app. Here's the Apple interface as well as the Android interface. If you have a player at your library or at your branch, you'll see that the apps actually look a lot like the physical player. So, and it's designed to be pretty intuitive. The player that NLS designed, as well as the app, have been tested with people who are totally blind, so and they are able to work it with ease. So how BARD is accessed, they'll need to apply for BARD. There's a separate application than the regional and sub-regional applications, but it's just some paperwork for NLS to have since they're managing a lot of BARD. The current patron can also call their regional or sub-regional, and usually the staff will be willing to set them up for BARD. From there, they'll need to wait for approval and confirmation containing a temporary password, then change the temporary password to a permanent one, and then at that point, just download the app or BARD Express to a qualifying device and log in using a username and the permanent password you created. So getting close to the end now, what you can do to spread the word, you can know who qualifies. Realize that 1 in 10 of all patrons that enter the library have a disability, whether it be visible or invisible, and the disability may qualify them for the service. You can mention the service to qualifying patrons and ask if they are interested. You can certify them if you are comfortable, or get one of your peers who is comfortable to certify them. You can give them their regional or sub-regional's library information and then send it in, and continue to advocate for the services provided by NLS and its network libraries. And finally, how to know who qualifies. These are just some things I've noticed and picked up on over the years. If they ask you to read something out loud, if they go to the large print section regularly, if they hold books close to their face, if they ask to use a magnifier, if they mention being dyslexic or ask for learning disability accommodations, if they have a noticeable physical disability where you know that it physically pains them to hold a book for an extended period of time, even if it's a big book, it still would be something that could qualify them. It could be something as simple as severe arthritis, if it's bad enough, or if they just disclose their disability in conversation, which, as y'all know as librarians, people like to talk, they like to talk about themselves, and they like to tell you about their problems. And sometimes they'll disclose just right off the bat. You never want to ask them about their disability, but if it just comes up, there's your opportunity. And I'm ready to take questions whenever my presentation's complete.
All right, Kaitlyn, thank you so much. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure our participants have learned a lot as well. Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
Number one, do you need to say, quote, this image is ... unquote, or does the software automatically identify it?
From my experience, it automatically identifies it as an image, so you don't actually say this image does blah, blah, blah. Like, it'll tell you when you're going through the document or going through the website that an image, that you've reached an image or a picture, and you just say, like, if it's a man in a boat, say something, man with gray hair in a boat in a very serene location surrounded by forests, things like that.
Okay. Next question. What initiatives have been successful for improved inclusion for neurodivergent library users? What has been the most efficient and successful mode of receiving feedback from neurodivergent users?
Gosh, I'm not sure if I 100% understand the question. Is it like people with brain malfunctions? Is that what you're describing?
Maybe
Learning.
the person that asked the question will chime in. I've not heard that word before myself.
Yes,
so,
I'm unfamiliar.
Wanted to also share that, let's see, North Carolina has some resources to share as well.
Okay.
They have a standing collection and also contract with Perkins for fill-in needs.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, so
I knew their collection was extensive to begin with, but it's good to know they also contract with Perkins for it.
Let's see. Usually divergence is equal to autism, ADHD, etc.
Well, the Virginia Beach Public Library, they have sensory story times, which have been very successful and have had high turnout. But as a library that serves people with vision, physical, or learning disabilities, talking book libraries at this point are not, it's not within the qualifications. Autism, ADHD are not within the qualifications for service. It's not to say that they won't be eventually, but at this point, the talking books libraries just aren't able to do anything as far as that's concerned, because they can't get the material, they can't get barred at this point in time. However, the sensory story times put on by the Virginia Beach Public Library have been very successful. They've gotten a lot of positive feedback from parents, and they actually happen once every month here.
Okay, I'm just scanning real quickly. Someone made a good comment. Craig did as well. The best advocate for our program as public librarians paying attention is public libraries paying attention and working with us. So your things, your spotter, your tips, things are really clued in on that. Those are things that I think we all need to be working with. Not seeing any other questions, I'm going to read the closing statement. Thank you, Kaitlyn, for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact your state library's continuing education coordinator. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that with your feedback. Again, the last page of the survey will be a certificate displaying credits earned. Thanks all, and be sure to join us again at 1:30 for the next concurrent sessions. Either You Don't Look Like a Librarian or Team RA. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been very helpful, and if we don't see you later, have a great day.
Yes. Thank y'all.